Well, I'm delighted to be joined on this Zoom call by Paul Shamplina, landlord and also founder of Landlord Action, TV presenter, board member of Hamilton Fraser, endless list, Paul. And we're going to chew the cud about, the challenges facing landlords through the COVID-19 pandemic. But before we get going with that, I've just mentioned a few of the things that you get up to. You're continually on the go, aren't you?
I am on the go. I'm trying to get a deal with Red Bull. I'll tell you a really funny story before I answer the question. So one of my ex-marketing guys, he knows that I drink Red Bull and it's really bad for you, but I drink it and it's just, whatever, because I train very early. And he wrote to Red Bull. I mean, I know it's not an advertising spot for everyone. He wrote to Red Bull and said, brand ambassador drinks a lot of Red Bull. And they came back and said, well, no, we only sponsor elite sportsmen. So I got declined. I was very hurt by that. But anyway, I've moved on. Yes, I'm really busy. We are now in, is it second or third lockdown? I can't remember.
Third.
I've lost the will, right? So we're in third lockdown. I'm at the office. We've got 225 staff at Hamilton Fraser. There's about 15 of us in the office. And we got 12 or 13 brands. We started 3 or 4 new businesses in lockdown, believe it or not. We started the mediation business, which is going really well. We started a letting agent advice line, which is called HF Assist. We started OME, which is a deposit replacement alternative. And on the 1st of September, we started total landlord mortgages. So yeah, we've been busy, but it's amazing how things have just changed and how we're running a business with 205 people working remotely, Vanessa.
I know, and a year ago we could never have envisaged what would happen, and the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdowns on the private rented sector. I mean, obviously we're very fortunate that for this third lockdown, the government has allowed the property market to stay open, and very exciting today, just hot off the press, that Israel have announced that they found a cure for COVID-19. So for me, I don't know how it is for you, Paul, but I definitely think there's light at the end of the COVID-19 tunnel now.
Yeah, there is. I mean, you know what? Once getting the vaccines out and hearing that there's a cure, the science that's out there, it's great. I mean, everyone has dealt with COVID in a different way, and I think obviously the second variant that's come around, I've known far more people that have caught it. I hadn't had it all my life. I mean, in the first lockdown, I was working from home. And I think in the first lockdown, I did about 40 to 45 webinars, an engagement. I said to the staff, at Hamilton Fraser and the directors here, I said, it's all about customer engagement. And I did that for my mental health. I thought if I did a webinar a day, I was doing Facebook Lives and whatever. And I even did one webinar, it was quite funny, where I was doing a webinar and my daughter, I don't think my kids were in pajamas for God knows how many months. And my daughter came out, I was doing a webinar, I think it was to about, I don't know, I can't remember, I think about 200-300 landlords or whatever. And my daughter came up to me and she wanted me to do a TikTok while I was presenting. It was quite funny, actually. Just how people were just evolving, working from home. But I struggled in the first week to 6 weeks, 3-4 weeks. Because I'm out and about, and you know me, I've got millions of hats, and I struggled early on, but I've come back now, and and now I've got a new position at Hamilton Fraser. I'm now Chief Commercial Officer, so I'm on the board now, so I oversee all the commercials and sales relating to the business. And like I said, we've got a big business, and most of our business relates to well-known brands like My Deposits, the Property Redress Scheme, Total Landlord Insurance, Client Money Protect, Landlords, and all that type of stuff. So, we just had to evolve. And of course, I'm sure we're going to come on to evictions very shortly, and Landlord Action, which is just, I've stepped back into Landlord Action, helping manage Landlord Action, where we're taking on more and more staff. I've got more staff in Landlord Action than ever before, but cases aren't ending, Vanessa. So I'm actually going to do a session with all my staff. We've got 16 staff at Landlord Action, albeit there's about 4 or 5 in the office and working remotely. We've got another 2 solicitors coming on and paralegal and legal execs. The problem, I'm actually doing a presentation to the staff on dealing with landlords, communicating with landlords, having difficult conversations. you know, I've got landlords. I mean, we've got a record number of landlords now that owed over 1 year's rent arrears. I've got one landlord I spoke to last week. Her name's Vanessa as well. She's owed 2.5 years rent arrears. And we can't tell these landlords when they're going to get their property back because evictions aren't happening. And as you know, the evictions ban is for evictions is listed for the 21st of February. I said very, very early on, evictions won't start happening till April, May time. And the House of Lords debated it literally last Thursday, and they mentioned June. It's just horrendous. And the reality is, and you know me, I'll tell it how it is. There are many, many, many tenants out there completely taking the biscuit and taking advantage of COVID. And landlords aren't banks, and as I said to you before we went on air, I'm speaking with the government literally tomorrow afternoon, the lady that oversees evictions. She heard me speak, but this is very political, and this is to stop a massive avalanche of evictions taking place all at once and mass homelessness. But it's just, the fallout of this, I predicted in 2021 there'd be about 150,000 possession claims issued at court. I still stick by that.
No, it's very, very difficult times, and landlords are not flavour of the month with the media. They never have been for many, many years, and even though many landlords have really worked with their tenants to maintain tenancies, and that through your mediation service as well, landlords are still getting bad press. And we hear of landlords struggling, but let's break that down. There are individual people out there who have worked extremely hard to build their portfolios. They have made many sacrifices, perhaps, to be able to build that portfolio. And now they are on the brink of losing everything because of tenants taking advantage, perhaps, of the eviction ban, or there will obviously be some genuine tenants that are struggling. But Paul, what can you say to these landlords that are on the brink of losing everything? What can you do to help them?
Well, let me just break it down, and let's just go back a little bit. So, look, commercial landlords have got it a lot worse than residential landlords. I said that early on, Vanessa. The problem you've got is in our resi lettings industry, the hardest hit was going to be the student market and the guaranteed and rent to rent market. And Vanessa, we've had many conversations about rent to rent over the years, and that market, we've come across many companies that aren't passing the rents on, and they haven't been collecting the money. And you're right, there's been amazing work by landlords, but landlords aren't banks. There is a breaking point. I know from speaking to police officers that there has been an increase in illegal evictions where landlords have just taken the law into their own hands. That's been an issue. I mean, look, the reality is this. We have furloughing in place until the end of April. So there's been government support for the best part of a year. Government lending and borrowing with regard to COVID has topped £290 billion. The money has to be paid back. But the reality is the government don't really care about the ones and twos landlords or the small landlords. They want institutional landlords. But the reality is there are going to be loads of landlords that are going to sell. I know one landlord who's been a landlord for the best part of 25 years. He's been selling one property one by one. As soon as the tenant has ended, tenancy's ended, he won't re-let again because of the fear he won't be able to get the tenants out. And he's just selling off because it's just becoming more too difficult. So you will see a lot of landlords that will sell properties with tenants in situ. That's definitely going to happen. I think there'll be opportunities for investors. I think the third, fourth quarter of the year, I think the market will turn. I had a bet with Russell Quirk, actually, a £200 bet. We used to do a Zoom chat like this, and he lucked out. I mean, he said it was all planned, but no, Russell, he lucked out because obviously, the stamp duty concession ends the 31st of March. We don't know if that's going to be suspended or tapered, but there's still a lot of income that they need to get through that. But with landlords that are really struggling, look, the reality is, Vanessa, we are a little bit older. And we remember the tough times. We remember the interest rates of 15, 16%, you know, and landlords that have been in the game the last 10, 12 years have had very, very cheap money. You know, what's the borrowing now at the moment? So most landlords are able to service their loans because they are very, very low. And the problem they've got is obviously their cash flow has been wiped out, you know, and it was the tenants in court pre-COVID, and I said that all along will be the landlords that will be worse affected, because don't forget, you know, when you're serving a notice on a tenant, it's a 6-month notice period. You've got to wait 6 months, and it's going to take you 6 to 8 months to get a gate of possession order. So now it's unprecedented, 12 to 14 months. And remember, Vanessa, we were talking, you know, we were involved in that document with the Lettings Industry Council. Prior to COVID, we were talking about banning a Section 21 and housing courts. I mean, that feels like a distant memory. But, you know, Section 21 will go in 12 to 18 months. I'm pretty sure of that. That's a given. But with these landlords, I mean, all I can say, and that's why we started our mediation business, so that we've got a business called the PRS. We've got some brilliant mediators, is landlords have to do deals with tenants. They've got to go to tenants. You know, the problem is you've got tenants that can't move. They might have lost their job, or they will be possibly taking advantage of the COVID situation, but rent arrears will be at an all-time high. And we've done quite a lot of work with I work closely with the National Residential Landlord Association, especially with Hamilton Fraser, because we provide the insurance for them. And they've come up with some big data. But you'll have to, if a landlord wants to sell their property, and loads of landlords are desperate to sell their property, they need vacant possession. So you're getting tenants that aren't allowing valuers or landlords to do valuation or even inspections. The best part of it is access is an issue, especially with if tenants are claiming they have COVID, and some have or whatever.
Yeah, or they feel vulnerable and they're shielding themselves.
Or they feel vulnerable and shielding, which has been the case, and we've had evictions that have been called off because of that, where bailiffs won't take the chance. But you will as a landlord, you have to think of this commercially. You know, if you've got £8,000 rent arrears, and you say to the tenant, "Will you leave in 28 days or 1 month if I write off the £8,000 rent arrears?" It would never have been suggested or thought of a year, 18 months ago to do that. But actually, if anyone comes to me, I'll tell it how it is. I said, if you can do a deal and a tenant leaves in a month and you write it off and they sign a deed of surrender and you won't pursue them, do it. Because what, you're going to wait another year? You know? And
yeah, it's cutting your losses, really, isn't it?
It's cutting your losses. And actually, how much is that property worth vacant and for you to get at the market? Bearing in mind, is the market going to turn? You know, you're going to have loads of completions that won't be able to complete by the 31st of March. You'll get a lot of transactions whereby you will get purchasers going to vendors to say, look, I'm threatening to pull out because I'm losing my money. And they're trying to chip away at the asking, I'm sure, just to get it over the line. And we know from our business, Total Landlord Mortgages, you know, we've had loads and loads of inquiries. Obviously, you know, we've got 600,000 landlords on our database that we service across the business. And there's loads of people, but obviously gaining finance, that's changing every day, getting valuations done, everything being undervalued, getting searches from the councils. I mean, transactional wise, it is taking absolutely ages to do a transaction. So, yeah, I mean, it is challenging. I think, you know, there is going to be opportunity, but, you know, however tough it is, and we've had this conversation at many landlord show about the industry, you know, and landlord bash this, that, whatever. It is still a good business to be in, you know, if you can get it right and you can get your tenant, you know, and treat your tenant. If your tenant is genuine, and vast majority of tenants are genuine and transparent, and they will communicate with you, you know, you show your tenant that you care. And, you know, I've seen some amazing things that landlords have done, you know, in this crisis. I think the first lockdown, everyone was at a shock, and the NHS and whatever. You know, I know landlords that have been giving properties to key workers for free. I know a landlord that was doing weekly shopping for a tenant. I know one commercial landlord in Woodford that was giving her commercial tenants rent-free periods for 3 months. I mean, heard some amazing stories, and that's why we even set up an article on a weekly basis called Landlord Hero, and I got a bit of abuse on Twitter for that, to be honest. But you know, the good landlord stories don't make the news, do they, Vanessa?
No, you're absolutely right, Paul. And you know, landlords have been struggling, and sometimes it's hard to see light at the end of the tunnel. But you know, something I discussed with Ben Beadle of the NRLA recently is that in a way we could be entering the golden era for the small landlord, because many tenants have really appreciated being able to communicate direct with their landlord. They feel that they kind of get maybe a more empathetic service than perhaps through a large, you know, corporate letting agency or a right to a build to rent landlord. So one thing that I think COVID has heightened or certainly spotlighted is you know, good relations between landlords and tenants really do pay dividends.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen in all my years of doing it, I definitely saw a shift of, you know, a lot more caring. But then I don't think I get contacted. I mean, it all went mad in the first lockdown. I was getting on Messenger, all these people contact. I was getting calls from landlords and tenants, obviously because of the TV show. So people reached out to me, and I heard some stories of some landlords actually acting disgracefully. And I actually was calling I felt so bad about it. I was calling some landlords on behalf of tenants. I was really, really annoyed about, you know, on genuine cases when I was going through it, because obviously I had a lot more time on my hands because I'm at home, you know, rather than the office where you're a bit more busier. And then I heard scenarios where I was helping doing payment plans from tenants to landlords and explaining the scenario. But you know, generally most landlords I was speaking to, it was, you know, help, you know, especially in the first lockdown. And as things got pulled back, and we were getting teed off, you know, earlier about, you know, it went, you know, from 14 days, the 2-month notice went to 3 months. We know it was going to 6 months. I mean, we just knew about that because we do a lot of advisory work with the government and stuff like that. And then, of course, it went 6 months in August, and then the courts reopened. I mean, we had for 6 months at Landlord Action, you know, all our staff were doing the work, but they were a little bit on go slow because the courts, you could issue the claims, but there was no hearings, no applications. You couldn't do a lot of stuff. And then in October, it went absolutely, we went from being quieter for those. I mean, we generally were really busy, but landlords didn't know they could serve their notices in those times. And we were saying, get your claims issued, serve the notices, just get the timing because you'd have to wait. And then it came to the situation when in October, it went absolutely mad, just really, really mad. And then I kind of like in the last month or so, I stepped back into Landlord Action, trying to help the staff, try and speak to staff, because, you know, it's now, you know, a lot of landlords now don't realise that, you know, serving a notice, issuing court proceedings, it is a last resort. Default wise, it's been about 5, 6, 7%, most probably, depending on the portfolio, depending on the area, depending, you know, a lot of landlords that aren't using letting agents, that aren't fully referencing. But of course, scenarios have changed during COVID, and actually tenants, you know, being a bit more transparent. If you've got a genuine tenant, they will speak to you. And actually, if you work with the tenant, actually you build stronger relations, like you said. And what I was trying to say to landlords is, you know, the good chance the tenant might stay with you longer, you know, if there's a payment plan, you know. And actually, the government got it wrong because they called it a rent holiday. It was a rent deferment. And putting the word holiday in anything, Vanessa, people think that it's going on the beach and putting your feet up. You know, it's not a holiday, it was deferment. So they got that wrong. And then from a meeting that we had, I was on a meeting, they changed the wording, which was quite important. And I must say, you know, that you know, I've known Ben for a long time. I've known, you know, I've worked with the NLA and the RLA for donkey's years. You know, they have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. You know, the problem is with the messaging, you know, they're not going to go with placards, start banging on the streets at number 10. It doesn't really work that way. What you need to try and do is you need to have an input and have a serious conversation about, well, things are going to change, but at least be in the room to be able to change some of the ruling. I mean, I'm a big advocator for the tenant saver loan, have been for a long time, but the government they're not into, whether there's going to be some give on that, I don't know. But, you know, it is about sustaining tenancies. But we've got, as you know, Vanessa, we've got a complete and utter mess with universal credit. I've been saying that for donkey's years. I've been a big I've been a big critic as to how it was mapped out, why it was mapped out, and the changes and just the systems. They've always been wrong for a certain extent, but now you've got the portal that's not working, and you're paying landlords 5 weeks in arrears. Why should they do it? And then because of that, it's going to force the landlords to start evicting tenants. But if you did the tenant saver loans and paid the landlords direct and had an undertaking, they can't evict the tenants, then people stay in the properties. It's just common sense. I've had to highlight this many times before.
Yeah, I just don't understand why in a pandemic that it can't be much easier for landlords to get direct payment to landlord.
It's common sense.
Well, I know I was going to say common sense sometimes kind of goes out the window in certain areas of our sector. But, I think what we can say is that in any crisis, there are always going to be extremes of people that try and take advantage of it one way or the other. But the vast majority of people, hopefully, are going to understand that everybody is in this together. Landlords are not charities. And as you say, to work together, and that's why I think there could be a kind of golden era for the small landlord that provides a very personal service to their tenants. And I think we always try and end these Zoom calls on something positive, Paul, because it's it does seem a lot of doom and gloom around, and we're all, as you say, mainly working in isolation from home, and sometimes it's hard to see a light at the end of the COVID tunnel, as I said. So have you got anything that you can end on that you feel is positive for landlords? Because one thing I will say is, if there's a huge mass exodus of landlords, then there's going to be a change in the supply and demand balance. And, if there's less supply and higher demand, then rents are only going to go up.
Yeah, I think, I think, and I said it, I'm actually filming it in a week's time. I've been asked to do a course for ages and ages, and I was quite reluctant, but I'm doing a course, self-manage or not to self-manage. Landlords put a price on your time. I'm going to write, it's just like a 2-hour little course, and I've got a letting agent and a multiple landlord in the room, and we're going to have a discussion, but I'm just doing a course to be, I think what it is, landlords have got to know what they want to do and how they want to do it, and how do they want to run their portfolio. Do they want to stay at the ones and twos? And actually, I say it all the time, your tenant is your customer. Yes. And you want your tenant to stay there as long as possible. But really, actually, there is going to be a massive upsurge, I think, this year with regard to build to rent. I think they were watching and waiting last year. I think actually understanding your product, understanding where you're at, what you want to do. Demand is always going to be there, and it's always going to be strong. And you're right, there will be landlords that will exit. Are those first-time buyers going to buy those properties? Or other landlords going to snap them up? Either way, they are going to come back on the market. So I think really, you've got that. This has been an unprecedented challenge, but obviously there's been loads of challenges coming up to what COVID is happening. Really, I think really the key is getting the right tenant is obviously really important. I think as landlords, selling yourself to the tenants is really, really important. Showing there is that personal touch, and I think that's important. And I think tenants now are actually going to be looking and profiling, believe it or not, their landlords more than just actually profiling the properties, and be realistic. Don't be greedy with your rents. It's really important. So I think that demand is going to be good. I think there will be some investment opportunities. But it's quite hard to really be positive, and I am the most positive person at this moment in time when you're really in the midst of it. And don't forget, the vast majority of landlords out there have had the experience of a tenant that may have missed 1 or 2 months' payment, but other than that, they haven't had to go to court, they haven't had to serve notices. But being proactive, rent arrears and voids will kill you. And actually, you're going to make sure that you can avoid that at all cost and look at your business modelling. But I say this all the time, bearing in mind what's happened with COVID, Really, really, really put a price on your time. Don't think short-sighted, you know. And I really am encouraging landlords now to use letting agents more than what they would have done in the past. With what's happening, you know, where they might have just gone for a let only rather than full management. And don't forget, letting agents are going to be regulated in the next year or so with regard to ROPA, you know, with regard to regulation of property agents. So look, the positive is demand is still going to be strong. Buy to let's always going to be here. And I would also say, look at the opportunities now, landlords, with regard to doing deals with your councils, 3-year direct deals and guaranteed rents with the councils actually being your tenants. I think a lot of landlords weren't really looking at that, but I think, you know what, it's now thinking, well, I want a decent tenant. I'm worried about my tenant not paying the rent, even their professional tenant. And actually be clever and think about, well, how does your property allow a tenant to work from home? You know, is there something appealing in that with regard to when you're doing viewings and how you can entice tenants to actually have something that's a little bit more office based, you know, because we know now that people are going to be working far more remotely.
Yeah, I know, very good advice there. I mean, one thing I've done is I've upgraded broadband speeds in some of our properties, because tenants obviously working from home, got kids homeschooling,
a big plus.
You know, et cetera, et cetera. So there are little things that we can do, you know, to ensure that tenants can remain in the property in the new post-COVID-19 environment, where we do believe that certainly people may be working from home a lot more, possibly going into the office only, you know, 2 or 3 days a week. So these are all really, really great tips, Paul. And I would add to that is, you know, reach out for professional advice. You have you know, market leading helpline, which is open from 9 to 5. You sometimes answer the phone yourself, because I've done it.
You know what I've done is one thing I always done, and what I mean now, you know, I'm sitting on the board at HF at Hamilton Fraser, you know, great company, whatever. But one thing I do is I always make sure that I get involved, and you know, I have been getting on the phone. I speak to people that think, oh, some people think, oh, is that really you? You know, and I speak to them and find out about what's going on, what the trends are. It's important, because when I do have conversations with the government, or when I am speaking to CEOs of letting agents, I need to know what's happening on the ground. And, you know, and that's where it's really weird, because coming back to the TV programme, it's coming out on Wednesday, the 17th of February at 8 p.m. I filmed the 6th series, Vanessa, just before lockdown, and they repeat it every day. It's been really, really big, and people think that I just do that for a living, and I don't. I just do that for the cameras, because that's just part of what I do media-wise, really. But it's important to. I mean, you're the same with regards to your website. I mean, I get a lot of stuff, obviously, with regard to Landlord Zone and working with Nigel Lewis. Is you personally get involved when, you know, most people will go on a forum when they have problems, they want questions answered, or there's issues. And I think one thing that we've been doing, and Nick as well, is we do highlight problems, issues, and, you know, being a landlord can be a lonely business, you know, so it is important to reach out and speak to people, but put a price on your time, you know, especially if you're working full time. You know, do you want to be, and I say this all the time when I'm training letting agents and landlords and all that, you know, do you want to be taking those calls from tenants that they've lost their keys, or the boiler's broken down, where actually for, you know, 60 quid a month, you could be, you know, or whatever it is a month, you could be paying, or 30 quid a month, whatever it is, you could be paying a management fee and the agent just takes over it. I think a lot of landlords can be really short-sighted.
Yes, I agree. And I would add to that, Paul, you know, to operate in prevention mode rather than cure mode. And that really plays back into your comment about more robust tenant referencing going forward. You want to make sure, you know, that you can robustly reference your tenant to mitigate the chances of getting, you know, a bad tenant into your property in the first place. So if you operate in prevention mode, which is partially what a lot of Property Tribes commentary is about, it's a lot less expensive, less heartache, less emotional stress than if you're constantly in cure mode, which can be a lot more stressful, a lot more expensive, and as we're seeing particularly with the eviction ban, could just be just a never-ending thing. So
I think you're right on the referencing, just on that point. you're going to get loads more landlords requesting as a given that there's got to be a guarantor. I mean, I've got a pal of mine I've known since I was 12 years old. He's one of the biggest landlords in Brighton. He's got something like 800-900 tenants. He's a big player out there. And he changed his referencing procedure with the eviction ban and made sure he had guarantors. Okay. You're going to have, I'm now seeing a lot of landlords asking for 6 months rent in advance. Okay. That's happening as well. You're going to see, and obviously rent guarantees. I mean, obviously there was the issue with regard to interrupted business and the case where rent guarantees weren't we paying out. The insurers are now, they are paying out. That's going to be a lot more expensive now, but landlords have got to think about, you know what, I want that peace of mind. I'll pay the few £100 for that policy just to make sure it covers me, because it's the best part of a year to evict a tenant if it goes to eviction.
Belts and braces, Paul, for sure. Well, as always, Paul, you have been the landlord's friend for over 2 decades now. You've got a book of that name that you wrote with the lovely Kate Faulkner. And I just want to thank you for not only everything that you do in front of the camera, but all of the multitude of things that you do behind the scenes to help landlords and be a voice for them to government level with the media, etc. So thank you ever so much for joining me.
Thank you, Vanessa. Pleasure with you as well.
And as always, you shared some really fantastic insights which landlords can take away from this, and I totally agree with you. Moving forward, homeowner guarantors and rent guarantee insurance, belts and braces.
It'd be great if we could come up with a penicillin or injection that could take away tenant pain, couldn't it, to landlords, emotional and financial. Can you imagine? That'd be a bestseller, wouldn't it?
It would. Well, I think just as you say, just to reach out to other people, I think is the best possible thing you can do. Do not, kind of struggle in isolation. Just talking to other people and hearing what they're doing, and getting support from them, it really can help. And as I said earlier, we are all in this together, and we can all work together to see our way through it. But for now, Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you. Keep safe, everyone, and keep up the good work, Vanessa.
Oh, thank you, and you. Stay safe.
Take care. Bye. Bye.